So I just wanted to pick up after what we did last week with doing the multiplane. The multiplane is your sort of intro to what we call 3D scene planning. And so this week we'll pick it up with moving on from multiplane to doing more of a 3D scene by rotating 2D layers in 3D space and actually doing a 3D camera move at the end of it. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So this is something that can only be done in Animate Pro and Harmony, but just so you know, we also have the ability to rotate planes in space. So this is more useful, less so in the case of when you're doing something that's like a landscape scene. A landscape scene, you probably want to keep everything parallel to your camera all the time. But sometimes you might want to do something like you might want to draw a building. So let's do this. Let's add a new layer. Let's just call this wall 1. So let's say, for example, I'll just draw a building here, and I'll just bring that back to a regular old pencil line, no opacity texture. Whoops. And I'll lower the thickness of my line a little bit, make it easier for us to see what's going on there. Okay, and then now if I do the same thing here, and let's bring that one down as well. Okay, so let's just, I can use my shift and arrow keys to move elements over in increments. So then I can do Command C or Control C, Control V to copy and paste, and then I can move those guys over a little bit, copy and paste again, and then move those guys over a little bit. And then I can take all 3 windows here and I can just center those up a little bit. And then when they're centered, I can copy and paste those guys, move them down. This is my quick building method, which I think works pretty well. And then once you have all those guys centered, at this point I might just want to take the corners of this building that I drew here and shift and arrow key those guys down a little bit just to give myself a bit extra room. And then I can take my paint unpainted tool and I'll just color in the walls. So let's say the walls are going to be gray, and then I'll color in the windows, and let's make the windows like a kind of lighter color there. Paint unpainted to fill those guys in. So now I've got this building done, or I've got one wall of the building done, and let's move this frame there back to the beginning, and I do have a camera move on this, so I'll just turn off the camera move for the moment because I don't want to see it right now. And then I'll hit F5 to extend my scene. So now I can take this wall here and I can duplicate the wall, duplicate the selected layer, and with the selected layer duplicated, now you can go in there with your advanced animation tools and you can do some rotations and stuff on this. But if you really want to rotate this guy in space, you've got to double click on the layer and enable 3D. So this is the thing that's only in Animate Pro and Harmony. Once you click enable 3D, now you have the ability to go in there and rotate this guy. So if you want to rotate it precisely 90 degrees, then you can go in there on that value there that you've got, and you could just select that guy. So actually let me do that a bit in more detail. So I've got that layer there selected. Double click on it. I used my rotate tool just to rotate it in the y-axis only, and then from here now, if you see that where that y-axis is, it's set right now to quaternions, by the way, which is fine. You can switch it to Euler angles if you're more comfortable with that, and then that just gives you the regular X, Y, and Z, or yeah, X, Y, and Z values there. So then you can select all of that, go -90, and now you've got exactly a 90-degree rotation on that. So now all you have to do is reposition that wall in space so that it's intersecting those other corners. This might be a good chance here to use your perspective view. So Command and Option or Control and Alt in your perspective view is going to help you to line those guys up there. If you do have the original wall layer centered on the drawing grid, it's a little bit easier to get these guys lined up because when it's centered on the drawing grid, then you just have to rotate it in space and move it over the exact length of that guy there. But just to show you in quick way here, so let's pretend that that is the most perfect building you've ever seen. Let me take this one here again, and I'll just remove that keyframe on there because it looks like I created a keyframe. Remove my keyframe all the way here if I want to, and F5 to extend the exposure there. Okay, so I'll take this wall now and I'll duplicate this wall. And now from this wall, I could just move this guy over. And if you want to have a wall that you have a door on it, you can always like duplicate a wall like this one, let's say, and enable 3D on this one. And then I could move this one forward like so. And then I could always go in there and I could remove a window and make a door. So if I go back into my drawing view, let's just say, for example, I'll remove all that stuff there. I'll select with my select tool. And let's see what's going on here. There we go. I can select with my select tool and hit delete. So I'll delete my window out of there, and I can always fill that gap in there first, and then I can go in again and D for dropper, make my door down there, and I could have a smaller window up there if I want, just for consistency's sake. And if I'm really kind of OCD a little bit, then I can line these guys up so that they look like they match. And then I can paint this. Now I can't use paint unpainted anymore because there's stuff painted there already, so I'll have to use my regular paint bucket. And I'll just add one more for my door, which I'll just make a black door there. Okay, so for some reason there's this area here. There we go. That didn't want to paint. All right, so now I've got my building, and if I rotate around it there, it looks pretty good. You can always go ahead and add a roof and a floor if you want to. I'm not going to bother, but if you did want to actually maybe I will bother. I think it's a little bit easier when you do this still to duplicate your layer, and the reason why is because now you have a reference for the exact size of the square that you need. So for example, if you go in there now and you want to take your rectangle tool there or your square tool or whatever have you, if you hold down shift, it does a perfect square, and then you can line it up with the existing walls or ceiling there. And I think I had the width of the line slightly wider when I was doing this ceiling, so I might just make that match a bit. And so that way you have a more precise measurement of what you need, what you need it to be. So then you can go back there and take the rest of your drawing and delete it, and then just color this in, let's say with the same color as the walls, and now you've got your roof. And so then I could go in my camera view here and enable 3D on this guy, and now I can take my transform tool and I can actually rotate this in space. And since I want to rotate it by a specific amount, and actually since I've done it in this view, I kind of want to rotate it in the red axis. But since I want to do a specific amount, I'll just double click on that and figure out which axis I'm trying to rotate there. So I'm trying to rotate this one, so I'll select that, and then I'll just make this 90 exactly. And now I can go back to my view here, and I can move it up. Let's see here. And you can use your top and side views as well for this, but I'm just using everything in the perspective view because it's kind of fast and easy. And also you might want to look at the top and or side view at the same time as you're looking at that view. So in this case I want to look at my top view probably, or my side view first, just to line up that there. And I can go to my top view and I can line it up down here. Once you get those exactly positioned, now if you go back to your perspective view and take a look from in here, it's working out pretty well. So I could just move that over a touch. And there we go, I've got my roof. And then I can take my roof and duplicate my roof, and I've got my floor, if I need a floor. Most of the time your building will be intersecting with the ground, so you won't actually need to have a floor. But if you do need to have a floor, you can just duplicate the roof. And then what I do now is I would take this building and I would first create a group out of this. So let's just go back into the network view here and order the network again to make it all look good here. And then I'll select those, or I'll select one of these guys just to make a peg out of it, because you want to control the entire thing with one peg, and I'll call this my building peg. And so you can connect that to all of the elements there, so the roofs and then the walls. And you will also, on your peg there, enable 3D on it so that you can move that building around in 3D. And then I would also go in here and add a composite just for this building, and then I'll put it inside the group. So first I'll just add the composite and I'll connect these layers together. Some people prefer to group first and then put the composite. It doesn't really matter. I just like to do it this way because then everything is nice and clean. I can turn my composite here to pass through so that it doesn't really do anything. And now I can select the building peg and my layers and my composite, and then I can hit Command or Control G for group. And actually that didn't work, so it's yeah, it should be Command G. So I think for some reason my shortcut wasn't working there, but and now that you have it in a group, it's much easier to select that. And you can even put an additional peg here outside the group if you want one. And this additional peg could also be set to 3D. So if you just want to grab that peg instead, and then you might want to take your rotate tool there and just move the pivot point of the building to the bottom side of the building, so that if you go in there and move this guy around, it's in the right spot. So if you want to move your rotate tool like perfectly, you'll do it in your top view and in your side view to get it where it belongs. So now when you move your building around, it's really moving around from the center point there of the building. Okay, so that is really the whole session there for working in a 3D space when you're working only with 2D objects. Let's just finish up here by taking this building and integrating it into a scene here. So maybe I'll scale it down a little bit. And maybe I'll even take this entire group here and duplicate it so that I can have a couple of buildings. You might want to have buildings, of course, that look different so that you don't have them all that look the same. But just for the purpose of this exercise here, I'll just duplicate a few buildings that all look the same, and then I'll pretend that I'm making a bit of a city block here. So maybe I'll even take both of those at the same time and duplicate them out, and then move them back. And move that one back. There we go. So I've got now 4 buildings in a row there. I could take this group here, duplicate that one, and move that one back. So when you actually zoom around this fake city here, this faux city now, you really do see that 3D aspect to it. This is like a really boring condo complex or something where all the buildings look the same. But just imagine if you did do some buildings that looked a bit different, then you would be able to get more of a 3D sense here. But the important part, again, is when you animate your camera, and also when you integrate in some of that multiplane. So I'll just turn back on my layers here. Maybe I'll turn the close one off, but let's leave the mid and the far one on. And let's turn on my camera move here and see what happens when I move through this. So when you're dealing with something like a background in the middle of a cityscape like this, you might want to take your background as well and rotate this guy in 3D space. So at least the ground plane, whatever's acting as your ground plane, should kind of intersect the buildings, you know, where their bottoms are there. And so it probably should just be one big old flat plane here. So if I zoom out in my perspective view and I take a look at this from the top, I really just want this to be a big flat plane, so I can scale it out in that direction, and I can just move it here so that it's one big flat plane there. And then you can take that far far one there from the top view, and let's move it back even farther so it's really far back. And then now if we zoom through this and let's play with our camera again here, even when you're doing a 2D camera move now, you see that when you do a 2D camera move through a 3D space, then you do get that sense now of it being a real 3D space. And on top of that now, if you do want to do a 3D camera move, you can double click on your camera peg and you can enable 3D on your camera peg as well. And when you do that, the only difference is now it allows you to rotate the camera in this direction as well. So this is how you do your full 3D camera. So you can rotate it in this direction and you can rotate it in this direction in X. So if you do want to get that real, let's say your establishing shot, you know, like I was talking about before, sometimes you want to start from really far away so you can zoom out on your camera there. Pretend that my background fills my screen because you always want to make sure your background fills your screen, but a really typical establishing shot is one that is looking down from above on the area that you're looking at. So let's just sort of move this over here. Maybe I'm zoomed out a little bit too far, so I can zoom back in again by scaling on this on that square there, and then bring it down. So let's say this is my typical establishing shot. I'm looking from far away, and I'm going to zoom in on my character, who let's say is standing on this building's roof here. So I might want to just zoom in all the way to where my character is standing over here. And it looks like things get distorted when you look outside the camera view when you're working in 3D. And it's simply because of the aspects of the camera that it kind of appears that way when you look around the outside. Of course, if you look in your perspective view, the perspective view never shows that kind of distortion. And it never shows it inside your camera view either. In other words, if you look on your camera tool there and then you turn on the camera mask, it never looks distorted within the camera mask. It's only outside the camera mask that it looks distorted. So now if we zoom in on this, we look through this, we have our full 3D camera move there, where we have our establishing shot from far away on the city, and then we're going to zoom in onto the roof where our character is standing. So let's leave that there for this week. I think that's a lot of information, and then I will come back at you next week and we'll talk about integrating 3D models into your scenes, and we'll talk about what happens when you do a 3D camera move when you have a layer, a 2D layer that you need to keep perpendicular to the camera. And so I'll leave that for next week. Have a good week, guys. Bye.